everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be diving into ADHD and how it impacts sex and relationships. I don't know about you, but in my personal life, I've seen a lot of adult women that I know and also people that I follow online being diagnosed with ADHD, especially in the last few years. And my producer Mia is also in the process of looking into getting an ADHD diagnosis. So it's something that we have been thinking about and exploring and wondering how this impacts sex and relationships. So naturally, we wanted to make a video all about this. Bear in mind, I've not covered this topic on this channel before, and it is humongous. So we are just going to be trying to scratch the surface here. And when I did a call out on my Instagram asking for people's experiences, if they do have ADHD, there was just such an overwhelming response, and a lot of people were so excited to have a video on this. And so I'm feeling the pressure, and I hope I can do justice. And also, Mia worked really hard on the script and the research for this video, and I am very excited because I've learned a lot in this process, and I hope that you learn something too. So let's go for it. So first off, what is ADHD? ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It's a condition that causes a person to have a variety of symptoms which may include impulsive behavior, hyperactivity, and difficulty paying attention. Some typical symptoms and associations with ADHD include difficulties with time management, difficulty with concentration, difficulty with organization, putting off work to the last minute, forgetting things, losing things, perfectionism, self-stimulation, fidgeting, stimulation and thrill-seeking behavior, misplaced motivation, susceptibility to addiction, and difficulty with self-regulation of emotions. These are just some of the symptoms traditionally associated with ADHD and used in diagnosis, but one of the things that this means is that a lot of women and girls don't get diagnosed when they do in fact have ADHD. Hence, a lot of these adult women now getting diagnosed. ADHD and gender. Original studies into ADHD in the 60s and 70s were only done on hyperactivity and on white boys. The first studies to include women only started in the late 1990s and early 2000s. So the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, but then also the mainstream perception of it, tends to only be reflective of white boys. And this has meant that women, girls, people of minority genders, and people of color have been left undiagnosed for years. And then likely due to nurture as well as nature, with girls being socialized and disciplined in a way that means they often suppress things like hyperactivity or characteristics of disorganization and tend to be a lot better at masking ADHD symptoms. Women and other minority genders are also more likely to internalize their ADHD symptoms and think that there is something wrong with them rather than that they have a condition that they can seek help and support with. So before we get further stuck in, I also want to mention some associated symptoms and comorbidities with ADHD because these are specifically relevant when it comes to sex and relationships. Some of these are low self-esteem, body dysmorphia, disordered eating, anxiety, depression and OCD, hypersexuality, hyposexuality, rejection sensitivity, trouble staying present, oversharing, risk-taking behavior, getting bored easily, and object permanence. And it's also important to understand the role of dopamine with ADHD and its impact on sex and relationships. ADHD and dopamine. You may have heard of dopamine. It is the feel-good hormone, that rush, that excitement, that yay, giddy, giddy, giddy. So people with ADHD have lower levels of dopamine, and this can explain a lot of the symptoms. People with ADHD are essentially trying to make and release extra dopamine to make up for the deficit. And so this can lead them to engage in behaviors that stimulate a dopamine release. So with all of that being said, let's look at how ADHD interacts with sex and relationships. ADHD and relationships. Things like problems with organization, losing things, forgetting small tasks and chores, forgetting plans or even anniversaries and birthdays can lead to some issues, especially if cohabiting with a partner. If there's one person with ADHD and one person without, then the non-ADHD person could potentially get frustrated and irritated with the ADHD person. And the person with ADHD may feel a lot of shame around letting their partner down. This can cause a lot of negative feelings and resentment in a relationship. And Ari Tuckman, who is a researcher and author of ADHD After Dark, found that the biggest barriers to a better sex life for couples where one person had ADHD was these negative feelings that crop up and can impact impact sexual desire. People with ADHD can also go into states of hyperfocus, which means they may forget plans or even forget that their partner even exists. But people can also hyperfocus on their partners, which can be a lot for the receiving partner and also quite overwhelming for the person hyperfocusing. But some people might like this and enjoy being the center of somebody's world. A lot of you may have heard of the phrase out of sight, out of mind, but when you don't have object permanence, this is quite literally the case. If you have ADHD, this can make things like being in communication during the day or long-distance relationships really hard. Emotional dysregulation and mood swings can also cause difficulty in relationships. They can make you more prone to arguing or zoning out completely and making your partner feel like that you're ignoring them. This can also happen with increased distractibility, where your partner just doesn't feel like you're listening to them or care about them. And sometimes, to keep things stimulating and get that dopamine hit, some people with ADHD can tend towards creating conflict and drama in relationships. And the liability to feeling bored means that people with ADHD can get bored in relationships and have trouble sustaining them. But it is not all conflict and issues and troubles. There are definitely some positives. On the flip side of the boredom, people with ADHD are likely to be exciting partners, always coming up with fun activities and plans to do together. Sounds like my kind of thing. Someone with ADHD who hyperfocuses on their partner can make their partner feel really special and loved. And people with ADHD who are working on their ADHD are likely to be really self-aware partners. This means putting a lot of effort into understanding your own behaviors, wants and needs, and how they impact others. And to be honest, this is something that all of us should be doing. ADHD and dating. Due to that ADHD dopamine quest, it can often manifest as looking for instant gratification, getting bored, and then leaving. It could also mean having trouble maintaining an interest in someone or having long-term relationships. A lot of people with ADHD say they find small talk excruciating and so often go deep and overshare on dates. This can make for a really brilliant and exciting date, as the person with ADHD is really authentic and honest, and you can get into some really interesting conversations. Hyper-focusing when dating or in the early stages of getting to know someone can also make someone with ADHD a bit more vulnerable, as they're investing a lot into somebody that they don't really know that much yet. But the flip side of vulnerability means that you are opening yourself up to really getting to know someone and allowing someone to really get to know you. And this is something that maybe a lot of us can relate to, but is especially strong with people with ADHD. And that is that seeking of that dopamine hit when somebody messages you and you get that notification. And for a lot of people with ADHD, receiving that text or not can make or break your day. And that's exhausting, honestly. This also ties into something that a lot of people with ADHD experience, and that is rejection sensitivity. Rejection sensitivity is an intense emotional response caused by the perception that you have disappointed people in your life, and the fear that because of their disappointment, they have withdrawn their love, respect, and approval. Sounds pretty brutal when dating is already a very vulnerable and brutal game. And this can impact people with ADHD who are single and dating, but then also in relationships. And this can also show up in the bedroom, feeling nervous about expressing your desires or kinks or new things that you want to do for fear of being rejected. And it can also come up as a worry about not performing or pleasing your partner and having trouble saying no for fear of them being rejected. This can make people with ADHD more likely to people please and not saying what they want, which can potentially lead to abusive dynamics in relationships. ADHD, relationship abuse, and love bombing. Because people with ADHD can be searching for dopamine, stimulation, and instant gratification, it can put them more at risk of love bombing and being swept up in extreme dating behaviors. Love bombing is an attempt to influence or manipulate a person through displays of intense and excessive adoration, attention, and affection. This often happens at the beginning of getting to know someone, and it can make the other person feel dependent or even addicted to them if they take any of that attention away. People with ADHD can also be more vulnerable to abuse within a relationship by people who tell them that they are lazy and incompetent if they struggle with things like organization and time management. People with ADHD can have high empathy and sensitivity, which can make them liable to taking on other people's problems and also attracting people who are looking for someone to offload their trauma onto. However, in a healthy mutual relationship, this high empathy and sensitivity can also be a really positive thing. So that's a little bit about how ADHD can impact dating and relationships. So now let's dive in to the world of sex. ADHD and sex. Hypersexuality and hyposexuality. Many people with ADHD experience hypersexuality or have a really high libido. And this is because sexual stimulation can release endorphins and that sweet, sweet dopamine. People with ADHD are often found to have higher sexual eagerness, and this means things like higher desire, kinkiness, willingness to try new things, use of pornography, and masturbation. Although not everybody with ADHD experiences sexual eagerness, some people might be asexual and have ADHD, and just like with all humans, everybody with ADHD is different. Moving on to hyposexuality, this is the opposite of hypersexuality. This is when a person's sex drive plummets and they often experience no interest in sex at all. This can be due to ADHD itself, perhaps finding sex overwhelming, or it just being forgotten and sidelined. It can also be the side effect of medications such as antidepressants, which are often prescribed to people with ADHD. So how do things like hypersexuality and hyposexuality impact sex and relationships? With both of these, and also just in any relationship ever, whether or not either of you have ADHD, it can cause a discrepancy in desire. With hypersexuality, it could potentially lead to more risk-taking behaviors when single or in a relationship, and that hyposexual low interest in sex can often lead to that partner feeling guilty or shame if they're not able to please their partner. Remember, there is absolutely nothing wrong with having a really high or a really low sex drive. Everybody's sexual needs and desires are different, and they can also fluctuate over time. There are so many other things related to ADHD that can impact sex, not just hyper and hyposexuality, and here is just some of them. Hypersensitivity and overstimulation. This could be finding certain kinds of touch, fluids, smells, sights overwhelming, and that sex is just too much stimulus. You might have trouble staying present and be easily distracted by your thoughts or environment. You might also have trouble reaching climax, again because of the distracting thoughts, but also because of shame around performance pressure or worrying about what your partner thinks. You might experience trouble getting in the mood because of over or under stimulation. You can be particularly sensitive to your surroundings and need certain lighting, music, scents, or textures. When it comes to hyperactivity in sex, people with ADHD might find it difficult to unwind and relax and get in the mood that way. And of course, again, with that dopamine quest, this can potentially lead to impulsive or risk-taking behaviors, such as unprotected sex, cheating, and having sex with people you regret. But also, people with ADHD can hyper-focus during sex, which makes sex a time when they are really focused, engaged, and present. And what about some other positives? Because of the distractibility and hypersensitivity that people with ADHD have first-hand experience with, this can make them really sensitive and attentive lovers when it comes to addressing the needs of their partner. People with ADHD can be really exciting and explorative lovers and partners, willing to try new things and being open-minded. Rejection sensitivity can lead to an understanding of how hard rejection is, and so then they're less likely to dismiss their partner's feelings or desires. As people with ADHD can be sensitive to and distracted by their environment, they're likely to pay attention to the details and create some very enjoyable and sexy environments. And also, many people with ADHD are likely to have put a lot of effort into learning about their own likes and dislikes and needs regarding sex and how to communicate them with a partner. So I also asked on my Instagram stories for any of you who have ADHD to share your experiences with sex and relationships, and so I wanted to include your voices in this and those first-hand experiences. So let's go. I find during sex, small things distract me, like the bed squeaking. Shout out to meds for allowing me to be present in my own life and even consider romance. Instrumental music, creating a clean and tidy space, warming myself up first, and communicating all helps. RSD means that I feel easily rejected, especially sexually, which impacts my self-esteem. ADHD and anxiety are strongly linked and can make sex and relationships feel harder. Realizing that I'm not addicted to porn, but my brain needs stimulation and gets bored with just imagination. Mental hyperactivity means I have to fantasize during sex or I can't focus and stay turned on. It is easy to get distracted, so blindfolds are great. My biggest struggle is making sure I don't ignore my partner during periods of hyperfocus and overstimulation. My boyfriend has ADHD, and I found during sex is the one time he is 100% present. Me and my husband both have ADHD. Life becomes so overwhelming, sex just doesn't happen. We're ace and have regular intimacy time, but half the time we end up talking about something else or get distracted and then later realize neither of us was satisfied or fulfilled. Mostly that it's exhausting. I mask a lot around new people, then worry how they will react. I also tend to use conflict as a way to maintain my interest in relationships. You have a hard time remembering feelings you have for others. Object permanence applies to feelings too. Trying to make your partner understand ADHD procrastination and hyperfocus cycles aren't laziness. For me, I tend to hyperfocus a lot on my crushes/relationships, so that can get really unhealthy. I tend to get bored, so my kinky side comes out, or things are switched up a lot because of boredom. Sensory issues definitely make dealing with fluids and tastes, etc. during sex pretty rough. I forgot our anniversary and his birthday because of my ADHD, and I think it led to us breaking up. Mood swings are crazy. One minute I am the happiest and the next I am raging. ADHD has led me to take more sexual risks in the past, like unsafe sex and lots of morning after regret. Emotional regulation and rejection-sensitive dysphoria can impact my relationships a lot. Constantly worried that it's hyperfixation, not love, and that I'll lose interest in a few months. We can definitely hyperfocus on each other, and that does make for some 10 out of 10 sexy times. The memory issues are horrendous, makes birth control a nightmare. I have forgotten it so many times. Get bored of people I'm seeing really quickly. Never been in a relationship. My fiance has ADHD, and though I love him, it sometimes feels like looking after a kid. There is a strong correlation between kinky sex and ADHD. We need constant new stimuli. A constant need for mental or sensory stimulation means I masturbate about 5 times a day. Sensory aversion/sensitivities being triggered unknowingly by the other person. Can't do small talk on first dates and accidentally spill guts on deep topics. Oops. Online dating with ADHD is so hard. I lose focus/interest in texting conversations easily. It's very hard to stay engaged, lots of shame around wandering thoughts, and hard to reach orgasm. Using sex as a form of stimulation rather than intimacy causes fights. Find that it contributes to my overthinking about everything in a relationship. I have ADHD and I have such problems with zoning out and getting distracted during sex. Long distance relationships do not work with ADHD because we got no object permanence of someone. The constant need for novelty and long-term relationships are a difficult combination. Irritation/impulsivity can cause arguments to be worse than they need to be. My partner gets sad that I never look like I'm listening to them. I am. My boyfriend has ADHD and he likes a lot to happen at the same time. A little hair pull, a little slap, change in speed. I get bored and in a rut, and it comes across as low sex drive. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a response to that. It was so interesting reading through your experiences, and yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So as we can see, ADHD can massively impact people's experiences of sex and relationships. But one of the things that Ari Tuckman likes to say is that ADHD doesn't invent new problems, it just exacerbates universal ones. And so when it comes to things that can help with these problems, they are also very much universal solutions. And you will have heard me talk about many of these things before, but let's dive into some tips and advice. Sex and relationships with ADHD advice. Figuring out your sexual preferences and what works best for you. Really think about your 5 senses and how these can be stimulated in a way that you want them to be, and how to avoid having them be triggered in a way that you don't want them to be. Kink can be a really useful tool for people with ADHD to control their senses. For example, using a blindfold can help remove distractions and overstimulation. Also, power play and being told what to do can help with staying focused and present, and kink can also be a safer way to engage in thrill-seeking and risk-taking. You can create a transition period or ritual to help you get in the mood and decompress from the day. Scheduling sex, I have a whole video about that if you want to watch. Remove distractions and create the best sexual environment for you. Take the pressure off orgasm. I also have a whole video about that. Understand your turn-ons and your turn-offs, what hits your sexual accelerator and what hits your sexual brake. Again, I have a whole video about that. Think about ways to combat boredom in sex and relationships that involve less risky behaviors. This will obviously be different for everyone. Different things will appeal to different people, but here are just some examples. Plan activities and adventures with partners. Can be as simple as trying new positions or sex toys in the bedroom. Create a yes, no, maybe list. Maybe explore group sex together. And also, ethical non-monogamy might be something that you're interested in exploring. Like I've said, all people with ADHD are different. Not everyone with ADHD will be monogamous. There'll be plenty of polyamorous people with ADHD, and that can be something that certainly helps. And of course, I've said this to death in many videos, but communication is so important here. Not just in terms of your sexual preferences and what your desires and wants and needs are in the bedroom, but also if you are in a relationship, navigating things like house chores and division of labor and all of that, because that can certainly impact feelings towards each other in a relationship. And some other things that can help people with ADHD are things like meditation, medication, therapy, and practicing lots of self-compassion, because you are not broken. And then also, because it is not just the responsibility of the person with ADHD to work on themselves, here are some tips for partners of people with ADHD. Recognize that it is not personal. I know it feels personal, it is not personal. Your partner not being able to orgasm or not doing the washing up doesn't mean that they don't care about you, love you, or are attracted to you. Take the pressure off your partner to perform during sex and be patient and reassuring. Take the time to learn what your partner's needs, likes, and dislikes are in the bedroom. Also, set boundaries for yourself. It is not your responsibility to look after your partner. You can work together on a plan so that both of you are having your needs met and feel supported by each other. Do your own research about ADHD and, of course, communicate. Please communicate with your partners. That would be great. Thanks. We have covered so much here, and yet I still feel like we're really scratching the surface. Some of the things that we haven't really talked about is ADHD medication and pregnancy, how ADHD can impact your menstrual cycle and vice versa. Like, there is just so much more there. If you want to share any of your own experiences with ADHD and sex and relationships, please do in the comments. And I just want to make it really clear that if you do have ADHD, you are not broken. You are absolutely deserving of love and support. Loads of people with ADHD have the sex lives and relationships that they want and find fulfilling. So just take your time, give yourself lots of self-compassion, and figure out what it is that you want and need. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video interesting or helpful. Were there any parts that really resonated with you? I hope that you're doing well, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.